Breaks are great for rest, but they are terrible for retention. So, in this episode of Classroom Coffee Break, we're going to talk about how to review strategically to get students engaged and avoid that where am I? And what is math kind of vibe. I'm John Van Dusen, a longtime teacher, coach, and Army officer. And in this episode of Classroom Coffee Break, we're going to talk about that awkward moment when it's the first day back from a break, whether that's Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, spring break, or the big one, summer, and how your students walk in like they've never even seen a pencil before. So let's get right after it. So I first want to preface this by saying I am not referencing any research at all, although I know there is a ton of research out there on the students forgetting things. And I know some school districts go year round to help prevent that academic decline, but this is just coming from my own experience and my own interactions with students. And I want to start by saying that decline is real. So the forgetting curve doesn't take a vacation. And it's interesting because we see this not just in academics, but think about anything else that you do. If you do it every single day, it gets to the point where it's kind of routine. And even if you take a few days off and people say like, oh, riding a bike, right. But if you haven't ridden a bike in a while, the first time you get on the bike, you might forget exactly how to shift, how to do the foot clips, where your correct gears are for going uphill. I think of weightlifting because being a football coach, we have students that are weightlifting. If they go all spring break and do nothing in a weight room at all, they're going to come back and they will have lost some of their gains. So it's not surprising that students coming out of a break lose academic gains. It's just one of those things that happens. It's kind of that use it or lose it mentality. So another reason students seem to forget anything is routine disruption. And over the break, their focus goes from a very regimented routine in school, having to do work, having homework, having routines in each classroom, to they might not have much of a routine at home if they are at home. If they're out on vacation, their routine is completely messed up. Just as a personal example, I'm going to go out to California for 2 weeks for the Army, and my routine is going to be completely off whack, not because of the teaching, but because of the time change. There's a 2-hour time difference. So for that first 4 or 5 days, when it gets to be 7, 8 o'clock at night, I'm going to be ready for bed. But at the same time, I'm going to be waking up at 3 in the morning because my body is saying, hey, it's time to get up. So your students do the same thing, whether they're at home or whether on their vacation. Break is a time to get some rest. But with that, a lot of times they are going to shift into Netflix and snack mode instead of a routine of good, healthy sleep and good, healthy interaction with technology and good, healthy food. And who knows what time bedtime is, right? I mean, they might usually go to bed at 9, 10 o'clock at night and wake up at between 6 and 7. But during a break, a lot of times kids will stay up a lot longer playing games with their friends, having a sleepover, doing whatever, and then sleep till 10, 11 o'clock. So that first day back, their body is rejecting literally everything that's going on in the classroom. I don't like it. So understand that we are trying to get students not just to review the material, but also back into some type of routine. And the last part I'll mention about why it appears that students seem to forget everything is they may be having some mental whiplash, if you will, from just life stuff, right? Some students have a blast on break. They go on vacation with their family. They do a lot of fun things. And for other students, sometimes they dread a break because school equals safety, school equals routine. School means that they are in a safe place for 7 hours a day. They stay after for sports. They stay after for clubs. They're in a safe place where they get fed, they get cared for, and not all students get that when they get home. And that is one of the saddest parts for me being a teacher, is understanding some of my students' stories that are just tragic. So you may have some students that are coming back from break and they didn't have a great time. So for them, getting back to school is actually better and maybe even a relief, but still, because those routines were disrupted and because they weren't using it every day, it's going to appear like they've lost all kinds of knowledge when in actuality, we just got to pull it out of there. So how do we use smart strategies to review without repeating everything that we had to do? So strategy number one is to hit the ground recapping, not reteaching. So using short little assignments, bell ringers, warm-ups, quick games that just helps jog their memory and gets them to remember what they already know. I really like to use different engagement strategies for this, like Jigsaw or scavenger hunts, Kahoots, Jeopardy style games, something that keeps students active and also keeps them engaged, not just with the content, but with each other. Because when they're coming back from a break, it's not just the cognitive academics that went away, but it's also some of those social interactions, because those social interactions definitely changed over the break and how they interacted with their peers. So I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone. And if you go back to episode 21 on engagement strategies and how to make a boring curriculum not boring, you can use a lot of those same things to help review with what you're doing. Another strategy is to spiral backward to move forward. And what I mean by that is mentally anchor them to something they should already know, something they've known for a long time. If you can anchor them with that and then move them forward with review, then you will be able to get them to review a lot quicker and be able to get to new material a lot faster. So another way to do that is to anchor it in current events. So being a history teacher, there's all types of opportunities for me to take whatever we're learning in history and anchor it to a current event, because something that we're talking about, it might have been the first time this ever happened. Well, they're talking about it on CNN and Fox and MSNBC, and it's right here. So I'm going to anchor it to that current event and then come back and say, hey, so this is where this actually started. So that's going to do a couple things. One, it's going to anchor it in something that the students have already heard about. But two, it's going to give that kind of origin story vibe where a lot of times students are like, wait, why do we call it that? So it's going to give you a chance, gain some curiosity, and hopefully gain some engagement that way. So another way, and this really just goes back to those engagement strategies, is visuals and hands-on maps, charts, manipulatives. And as a bonus tip, if you ask the students to make those review tools, that's going to just boost their remembering and boost their acknowledgement of what they already know if you ask them to make those charts, those maps, and those manipulatives. And the last thing I'll say for smart strategies to review without repeating is to do some quick formative assessments. So if you go back to episode 5, we talked about the difference between formative and summative assessment, where they are high quantity but low risk. So I can bomb a 3-question exit ticket because it's not graded. But at the same time, those 3 questions are going to get me to start thinking about, oh, yes, I do remember learning about this. I do remember learning about this. So doing those quick formative assessments are not just going to help you see this where your students are, but it's going to give them a chance to see where they are and also spark some of those memories so that you can move on to new content. So let's talk about the big one. Let's talk about coming back from summer break. Now, this is tough for several reasons. First off, all of the things we talked about are still true with the cognitive decline, the routine disruption, and students who struggle with breaks because school is their safe place. So all of those things are in effect. And now they are in a new grade level, and you have a lot of brand new students that you have probably not taught before, unless you were in a situation where you're a specials teacher and you teach, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So you had them before, or if you changed grade levels, but then you're on the hook because you have new content that you're trying to learn as well. So now we have all those same problems we talked about, as well as some more. So I talk about this all the time, but you have to start with building those relationships. You have to start with building trust and understanding where your students are, give them a chance to know you a little bit. I know it's really fun in the 8th grade hallway at Kingsford Middle School because we have 7th graders walking around all the time. So they all kind of know us as teachers, but they just know us as the jokesters in the hallway. We're always cracking jokes. We're always, picking on each other and picking fun and laughing and joking and having a great time. So they know about us, but they don't know what it's like to be in our classroom. So you really have to start with those relationships. And again, if you go back to several episodes in Classroom Coffee Break, I talk about those relationships, how to build them, how important they are, and how to connect with your students in appropriate ways. So that first week, yeah, you can throw some content in there, but mainly it's going to be about building that team and getting to know your students and getting them to know you. So the second part of coming back from summer is don't assume your students know anything. I know that sounds really weird, but don't assume that they know anything. Make sure that you are assessing them. Again, you can use those formative assessments, you can use pre-assessments, whatever it takes to understand where your students are and what gaps that there are that you need to fill. And it's really important if you have students that are new to the district. And the reason I bring that up is something as simple as lunch. Like the third day of school, we had flivver bowls for lunch, which are fantastic, right? It's a bowl with some mashed potatoes and chicken nuggets or chicken tater tots or whatever they are and some corn. They're one of the favorite meals of students all over. So when I announce, hey, for lunch, who wants a flivver bowl? There's cheering, people are raising their hand, they're super excited. I have some new students in my district and they're like, what in the heck is a flivver bowl? So don't assume that your students know anything from the lunch to vocab to where they're supposed to plug in their Chromebook or whatever. So don't assume they know anything. Make sure you assess and then work on filling those gaps. And the last part I'll mention about coming back from summer, as you're building those relationships, as you're assessing where those gaps are, make sure that you're mixing in some new stuff with the old. And as a history teacher, again, this is super interesting for me because I can work in those current events. I can work in things that happened over the summertime, and I can still reference back to things they learned the previous year, kind of. Now, as an 8th grade teacher in Michigan, I start basically where 5th grade ends. 6th and 7th grade do totally different things in their history classes. So I really need to reach back and try to get them to remember stuff they did in 5th grade, which again, I can't assume they remember any of it. So I have to assess where they are, assess those gaps. And then, oh, by the way, remember the kid at lunch doesn't know what a flivver bowl was? If they come from a different state, they may have had different standards. So they may have not learned anything that you're reviewing, or maybe they hit it double time. You're not really sure. So mix in the old with the new and roll with it. Don't bore them with just review, right? Start with some of those engaging strategies, get some new content in there. And usually within a couple days after summer, maybe it's the first week, you'll be rolling right back into your wheelhouse and teaching them up on the content they need to know. So hopefully you found some value in this episode, and I'd love to hear how you handle coming back from a break, whether that's a shorter break like a Thanksgiving break, or a longer break like spring break or Christmas break, or the big break of summer. And something that made me think about while I was recording this episode is maybe I should do an episode on when you have students that take, I'll call them unscheduled breaks. So sometimes we'll have students that they'll take spring break the week before, or they'll have 4 days off on another week because they're going to watch a sibling graduate from college, or that's just when their parents could get off work. I should do an episode on how to keep up with that because, they have the sheet that says, oh yeah, I'll check Google Classroom every day. Dude, you're sitting on the beach every day. I know you're not checking Google Classroom. So maybe I should do an episode on that. But until next time, I ask that you like, subscribe, share with your friends, and join us next time on your Classroom Coffee Break.